We're going to try another flipped lesson. So we're starting chapter 4, which is areas of polygons. So remember, you're going to write down the notes in your notebook. I'll look at those tomorrow. So please copy down chapter 4, areas of polygons, and go ahead and draw those 4 pictures that you see so that you remember what a polygon is. You can pause the video when you need to, and then hit play when you need to move on. So another way to look at a polygon, so polygons are closed plane figures, so it's closed, so they all come together, having 3 or more sides. So again, you're going to write down this definition, and you can write down some examples, a triangle, a rectangle, squares. Here's some more polygons. You don't need to write them down, but just so you're aware, they all have more than 3 sides, and they're closed plane figures. Again, when you're ready, if you need to, pause the video. When you're ready, move on. So now that we know what a polygon is, in this chapter we're going to look at the area of a polygon. So area is really the amount of surface that is covered. So go ahead and write that down. You do not need to write down or copy down the pictures, but this just shows you if I wanted to figure out the area of a square, that would be all of this pink area. If I wanted to figure out the area of a rectangle, that would be the yellow area. And I can calculate those. And my triangle would be the green. And a parallelogram would be this blue. So we're also going to look in this chapter at a trapezoid. So those are the ones we're going to study in this chapter. So this is just to show you what the area looks like. So we're going to start with section 1 of chapter 4, and we're looking at a area of a parallelogram. And a parallelogram is just a very specific type of polygon, which we just talked about. So a parallelogram has 2 pair of parallel sides. So if I drew 2 lines, these lines are parallel. So that shows you parallel. So parallel lines in a plane that never meet. So this would be something that is not parallel. So we're looking at parallelograms which have parallel sides. So examples are a square. So go ahead and draw that, write that down. A rectangle is an example of a parallelogram. And a rhombus is an example of a parallelogram. Once you're done, you may pause, but once you're done, go ahead and hit play. So like I said earlier, the whole purpose of this chapter is to calculate the area. So we're going to get the area of a parallelogram. And area is base multiplied times height. So remember when I use these parentheses, that's my way of showing multiplication. And the base is usually on the horizontal. Okay, so the bottom is the base, and then the height is perpendicular to the base. So here's the height, and it's perpendicular. So if you remember, perpendicular means it makes a 90-degree angle. And we always make that little square to show that. So if I find my base, I find the perpendicular sign, I know that that is the height. So we're going to do some practice problems to make sure we understand how to do that. Okay, so here's my first example. We're going to find the area of a polygon, which this is our parallelogram. So notice the first thing I do, actually the first thing I'd like you to do is draw the picture and write down the numbers. Then you're going to write down the formula. So on every quiz and test, I need to see the formula first. So then you need to figure out which is the base and which is the height. So back in the notes it said typically the base is the horizontal. 12 is my base. And then if I look to see where I make the perpendicular line, so there's the little square showing perpendicular. So going from that base, here is the height. So I'm going to label that as my height. And again, I want to see that in your notes. Now I'm going to plug in my numbers to the formula. So base was 12, height was 14. Multiply 12 times 14 and you get 168 meters squared. So why do we have m squared? Well, if we look, we have m times m. And we learned that when you have those two, you can rewrite it as m squared. Okay, so go ahead, write all that down, and we're going to do another example. Okay, here's another example. So go ahead, draw the picture, label the 2 lines, then write out your formula, But now we need to figure out which is the base and which is the height. So if I find my line, here's my perpendicular angle. So you know that the height is perpendicular to the base. So that means that this is the base. And here is our height. So because this is a parallelogram, the right side equals the left side, so the base is 8.5 feet. So I'm going to plug that in. Notice I keep it in the correct order. Here's my base. It's the first one. Then I multiply that times the height. And 8.5 times 4 gives me 34. And again, here's my feet squared. Because I have feet times feet, that gives me feet squared. But that doesn't mean I multiply again. That's just how I write the units. Let's go ahead and write all that down. And now you're going to try some on your own. So here you have 3 to do on your own. So please do as I've asked. Please first draw the picture. So you want to first draw the picture. I need you to label all the numbers. So you're going to then label. Okay, then you're going to write out the formula for each. So remember the formula, area equals base times height. And then I want to see you plug in those numbers and give me an answer. You should see a text box to the right where you're going to type in the answers for 1, 2, and 3, making sure you have units put onto the ends. I'm going to help you on the first one. My units for the first one, I have 2 m's, so that would be m squared. So pause the video. Once you've plugged in your answers, you may move on. Okay, here's another way to find the area of a parallelogram or a polygon. We use a grid pattern. So we're going to count the grid lines. So again, you're going to draw the picture. Add the grid lines. So we're going to count the grid lines. So this way I have 1, 2, and then the other way, so that's the horizontal way. The vertical, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So because this is horizontal, we're going to make that the base. So base, we have 2 grid lines. And then height, we have 5 grid lines. So area equals base, which we said was 2, times height, which we said was 5. Multiply those out. So area equals 10. And we're just going to write square units. Now you're going to try one on your own. So go ahead, draw the picture with the grid pattern, and then follow what we just did. So we count the grid pattern, we count the number of units, we write down the formula on every single question. We always write down the formula. Find an answer with correct units in the end. All right, so we're going to draw the picture. We're going to count our squares. We're going to write down the formula. And you're going to calculate the answer. And you're going to make sure you have the correct units written down. When you're finished, go ahead and write your answer into the text box on to the right. Once you're done with that, you may progress to the next slide. Okay, so now we have a word problem. So you make a photo prop for a school fair. You cut out a 10-inch. So if you look at that, the 10-inch cutout is right here. So you can put your face in there. So you have this huge prop that's 8 feet by 4 feet, and then you cut out 10 inches. So the problem is we can't compare those two unless we convert our feet to inches. So we're going to figure out the whole area of the wood. So the area would be the area of the wood that we started with. And that would be converted to inches. So if I take 8 feet and convert that to inches, that's 8 times 12. That gives me 96. I'll take my 4 feet times 12, and that will be 48. So that's how I get 96 times 48 for the area of the wood. And then the cutout is 10 by 10 inches. I don't need to do any conversions there. Do the multiplication. And I get 4,608 minus 100. So your final answer for the area of the wood of the photo minus the spot to put your face is 4,508 inches squared. Okay, so now you're going to do some practice ones on your own. So you're going to figure out the area of the yellow shaded region. So kind of like we just did, you're going to find the total area, and you're going to subtract out the cutout. Okay, this is all in feet, so you don't need to do any conversions. Okay, when you're done with that one, you're going to write your answer into the text box onto the right. Okay, and then this is your last problem that you need to solve on your own, and I tried to give you another one where you have to do some conversion. So remember, 1 foot is 12 inches, so here we have inches, here we have inches, but here we have a foot. I also gave you 3 numbers, so you need to figure out if my formula is area equals base times height. You need to figure out which of these 2 numbers is the height. So remember the definition of height. I'll give you a hint. So remember the definition of height, and one of these numbers you do not need to use. When you're finished, go ahead, write your answer into the text box on the right.